as well, Steve, for the invitation. I appreciate that. And look, former Commissioner and Mayor Sid Lycan is here. I didn't realize that you were a member of the Rubicon, Sid. He's muted, so he can't speak. But anyway, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you for a while.
I'm not a member. I'm just a guest.
Oh, okay. Well, still, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you for a long time. We used to have him in the studio on a pretty regular basis, and it was always nice having him in and listening to him talk about drumming. So you still have your drum circle? You still do that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. And
all right. Anyway, so going back to what Steve said, actually my day starts, I hit the road anywhere between about, I don't know, 3:15, 3:30 in the morning. That's when I start my trek in. Takes almost exactly 52 minutes to commute from my house in Philomath to Eugene one way. And then I hop in here and start putting together the morning newscast. I have some things that I've already put together from the previous day, and then I'm scouring, looking for anything that I may have missed, going through emails and the like, kind of putting it all together and getting it set up to go so that when we hit the air at about 6:05, that I'm ready to go with that, checking the schedule, the interview schedule, and making sure we don't have anybody that has last minute dropped out. And then start the show, like I said, at about 6:05 in the morning and continue on until about 9 a.m. As far as, at least on the air, going back, you know, he was asking kind of where I came from. I was originally, before I came here, was running a news talk and a sports talk station. So 2 stations up in our sister stations up north, and was doing that. The program director, and I don't know how long any of you have listened to KPNW, but prior to me coming here, the program director was a gentleman named Lee Shaver, who had been on the station for years. Lee, unfortunately, passed away from cancer, I think it was about 13 years ago. And there was nobody in the group of stations down here that knew anything about news talk. And so the station itself just kind of, you know, we had an operations manager that just made sure that the commercials got in correctly, and it just sort of floated for a while. It was gutted by Clear Channel prior to selling it. They wanted to, you know, make it look as lean and trim as possible, and they fired a number of people that were on here. I mean, if you've watched local television, I'm sure you know who Tom Adams was. He was on, I believe, KVAL. Anyway, he was here before that, Nancy Steele. So we had a full complement of news people. They had a morning show that had, I think it was 4 full-time people, and they had a traffic person and the like, and all of that essentially was thrown out the window. So I came down shortly after the Great Recession, when bottom fell out of everything. I was asked to come down and take over the station, and I was actually commuting, was doing the job up in up north, and was commuting here after I got done on the air there. And then when things really got bad during the recession, essentially they just were cutting bodies anywhere that they could. And we lost a number of people here in this market, up north, and it was, you know, became obvious that we were still going to have some sort of local presence here. We just didn't know what it was going to be. And so it was a matter of rejiggering people and kind of trying to figure out what we were going to do with KPNW. And that's when the wake up call started back then. And we needed to have a local presence, we needed to have a morning show, and we needed to have some sort of news. But essentially it became, one person running the station. Rob does the show for the 3 hours that we're on the air. He gets here about 5, puts his stuff together, the sports and so on and so forth, and then kind of off and on helps out through the day for booking guests and the like. But he's also on another station at this point, US 101, doing middays from 10 to 2. And so really KPNW is, 1.5 people, but I pretty much maintain everything. So when things go gunny, I'm the one that ends up, whether it's running into the back room, trying to figure out why the computers have failed, to getting the station back on the air, you name it, kind of a, chief cook and bottle washer. And really the morning show is a very little teeny part of kind of what goes on through my average day. Do you have another question you wanted to ask there, Steve? Because I don't know if that answered your question or not. And if anybody else wants to chime in with questions, because I'm not exactly sure kind of what your interests are and, what things you're curious about and want to hear about, and how far down the rabbit hole you want me to get with Inside Baseball.
Well, this is stuff that where our group is pretty news oriented, and so if you have insight on local situations, or not situations, but local stories that you can talk about, that would be good. We're one of our things is, our concerns is closing down all of the hydroelectric and electric producing plants around, and then thinking that we're going to go to electric cars, and we don't have any electricity to power the electric cars. And so we're trying to, I've been trying to figure out speakers for that, and just, we have discussions when we don't have a speaker about, between ourselves, about, someone heard that this dam was closing, or this was developing, and they're, like, for instance, we're concerned about the natural gas situation, that they're trying to outlaw natural gas in our,
right.
And so if you have information about things like that, that would be good. Just things that you think would.
That's my boss.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, and then those kind of issues would be good. I thought that you played a pivotal role in the fire coverage, because they're, other than just the basics of, there's a fire and there's firefighters, and then 10 minutes later, that was it. You spent hour after hour kind of keeping the community together. So I would,
okay, well,
be of interest to me.
Okay, well, I mean, as far as the natural gas thing goes, you have a fairly small but vocal group here in particular Eugene, that has the ear of a number of your city council members that are trying to essentially, as best they can, do away with anything that has a carbon footprint. And what's fascinating about that is that, I mean, if you're looking at, and I don't, whether you agree or disagree with global warming is not really the issue. It's just a matter of a lot of the power here in Eugene in particular, comes from natural gas. And people use it not only to heat their homes, but they also use it to cook and the like. And what isn't really being answered is what you're going to use as a replacement on the local power grid if natural gas were to be eliminated. eWeb is still doing a study right now, and I can't wait to see what the results are that would and looks at what would happen in that possibility. Because during peak times, you know, in the morning when people are getting up, at night when people are home and they're cooking, those are considered to be peak times on the grid. And if you're going to take away natural gas for hot water, for heating and cooling homes, for cooking, well, that means that that power has got to be made up somewhere. And for many people, that's going to be eWeb or sub or ePUD. That means they're going to have to increase, you know, they're going to have to increase their capabilities. And the question is where that power is going to come from. If they have to go outside and purchase it, it's going to be really expensive compared to what it is now for people that have, you know, kind of the hybrid of natural gas and electricity. And it's all part of what seems to be the green move here in Oregon to do away with natural gas or any of the carbon generated fuels. I was noticing the other day, because it was one of those rabbit holes that I went down, and was looking at what they call smart metering, where as they have the electrical meters on your home, and as opposed to having a human being come out, you know, they can all do it remotely, but also it will you can opt into a tiered residential electricity usage plan, where if you use electricity off the peak times, you'll get an extra discount on your electricity bill. And I knew that was done in some other areas. And so I'm, you know, kind of going down this rabbit hole to figure out, well, are there any savings to doing that? What are the benefits to doing that? It was one of those things I came across. Well, one thing that I found was really interesting was a group that had done a cost benefits analysis of that and whether it actually worked or not. But the question had to do with that if we were to go to electric cars, and over 50% of the population in America, if we had electric cars, that those electric cars would be the single largest electricity user in your home. And the question was, well, you know, you get home at night and the first thing you're going to have to do is plug your car in, because nobody wants to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to plug their car in to charge it up for the next day. But what struck me was that that vehicle was going to be the biggest drain on electricity in your home. So that leads to the question, well, where is the electricity on the grid going to come from if you're going to eliminate natural gas? Even some biofuels are considered to be carbon-based, coal burning and the like. And now, along with that, at least in Oregon and Washington and Idaho, there's a move to take the dams out of the power grid. Well, where's the electricity going to come from? We discovered with Texas that you can't rely on the windmills all the time to produce any power, either because there's no wind, they've frozen up like they did in Texas. What are you going to use? And where is that electricity going to come from? And how expensive is it going to be? You know, and all of those things are questions that somebody's going to have to answer. Right now in Eugene, the plan isn't so much the complete elimination of natural gas, although that is on the agenda for later on. Right now, it is essentially putting a ban on any more natural gas going into residences or new construction within the city limits. And I don't know if anybody's knows or not, but there is a fairly large waterfront project, riverfront project, that has been in the planning stages, and the developer for that particular that particular project has already said, if you take natural gas off the table, I'm done. We're not going to be a part of it. We're already done. So it depends on how much leverage that can be applied to the city council as to exactly what they're going to do in regards to natural gas, and whether they're going to listen to a minority of voices or they're going to listen to the majority who actually use natural gas in their homes and in their businesses right now. So that's, you know, that's really all I can tell you. I haven't really heard. I know that there was a reading on a resolution that took place. I don't know. I'm thinking it was about 2 months ago. I'm really bad with dates. On a resolution that would essentially stipulate the things that I just laid out, but no movement was really made on it in terms of adoption or anything else, but it's still on the table for discussion. So that's about all I can tell you. I know up in Washington, they're trying to do the same thing on a statewide basis. The legislature up there, the city of Seattle is considering a similar proposal. So the left coast is, at least in some ways, there is some political movement to swing that way. And like I said, the funny part of it is nobody's coming up with really solutions on what they're going to do at this point to replace, you know, the power that's being generated by it. And really, I mean, if you want to talk energy and fuel and everything else, the legislature is also considering a bill right now that would phase out the use of diesel fuels.
Yes.
Trying to think, I think it's by 2027. The last time I looked at it, I think that was when it was going to be phased out, or they want to phase it out and go to, you know, biodiesel, which right now in Oregon, statistically, and the numbers are, there's about 470 million gallons annually of diesel that is pumped in the state. About 15 million gallons. There's only one place in Oregon on a large scale that actually produces biodiesel. It's up in Salem. And right now, their capability at full capacity is 15 million gallons a year. So here's your question. Where's the other 455 million gallons of diesel fuel going to come from to replace that? And nobody seems to have an answer to that.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions they'd like?
Yeah, I'd like to comment.
Hi, Bill.
Hi. So I appreciate that your opening sort of presentation about the kind of the history of your involvement at KPNW, and I now understand better about some of the things that I'm a chronic complainer about, and because obviously, you know, you've really, you know, got a lot to do, and it's all on you, and so it's helpful to know that. And so I'll try not to be such a chronic complainer about some of the glitches, because obviously you're doing an awful lot with you know, with not much help, and so I certainly appreciate that. And also, yeah,
Well,
go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Oh, I was going to say, you know, one thing that is a truth in radio since deregulation, and this goes back 20 years, when the stipulations and limitations on ownership of radio stations, there used to be a time when you could only own a single AM and a single FM radio station in a market. And prior to that, you were even limited to, you know, you could only have 5 or 6 radio stations in total across the country. And with deregulation, what ended up happening was that you had a few companies that started sucking up a lot of radio stations. And then those groups sold their stations to even bigger companies. And those companies were driving, and they were publicly traded. And I'm thinking Clear Channel, Intercom, Cumulus, and a couple of others. They were publicly traded. And they were driving their stock prices up through acquisition. So the more radio stations that they could suck up, the higher they could drive the price of their stocks, until they finally hit a limit of, there are no other radio stations at this point they can buy. And so the question was, well, if you can't drive your stock price through acquisition, then how are you going to do that? Well, one of the things that's true about radio, television, newspapers is that, on a local level, we make our money selling advertising. Well, that's not always a constant thing, as we discovered here during the pandemic, that it's up and down. It varies along with the way that the economy flows. And during the recession, every other business, sorry about that, I didn't turn my phone off. And along with that, so it fluctuates. So how did they manage to try and keep their stocks up, profits up, and the like? Well, they started cutting staffs. And how did they do that? Well, they did it with automation. And we've gotten to a point now where you will have one person maybe running 2 stations. There are some markets where you have 1 or 2 people that are running a cluster of 5 radio stations. And so it can become, you're struggling just to keep everything on the air, beyond trying to create local content. And it can be a challenge. I will say, fortunately, that at least with our company, we've got at least 1 person per station. And in a lot of cases, or in some cases, we've got more than 1 person per station. But I'd have to say that among radio companies, we're kind of lucky. Across the street, and I literally do mean across the street, we have Cumulus, and they don't have that. And so, yeah, and you can hear it on the air. You can tell there are, constantly problems with automation systems. Anybody that has a computer knows that, it crashes. They know that all of a sudden Windows 10 decides it's going to do an update. And when it does, it's going to shut everything that you've got up on the computer down. And it's a constant struggle.
I do have
it can be difficult. You started to say, Bill?
I do have a question also about programming in the future.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Are you having trouble hearing me?
A little bit, yeah, but go ahead.
Trying to get a little closer to the microphone here. I haven't, since Rush died, I haven't been listening in the morning because it was too depressing, but obviously the news is out that Dan Bongino is going to be sort of taking over that time slot, and I don't know what is KPNW's plans going down the road for that.
Okay, yeah. Well, first off, Dan is getting a lot of publicity, and people are saying, "Oh, he's taking over the slot." No, he's not. There are a whole bunch of people that are out there that are looking to make a dent in that, local time, 9 a.m. to noon slot. He's just been really good about using social media to make it sound like that he's the heir apparent. He isn't. As a matter of fact, he's not even on Premier Networks, which is, when you hear about the EIB, the Excellence in Broadcasting, well, that was something a name that Rush created. It's Premier Radio. That is the syndicator and has been for years of the Rush Limbaugh show. Do I have a plan? Yes, I do. When are we going to pull the trigger on it? It's going to be coming up in April. I'm not saying right now who it is. I do have a backup plan. I had one going back to October of last year. And we're going to announce it soon. I'm not saying anything about it right now because there's still a couple of contracts, I's and T's to cross, I's to dot, but I do have a plan. I think it's a pretty good one. And we'll make an announcement on it soon. I'll give you some inside baseball on the deal with Rush and his passing. They continue to play, kind of like this combination of best of Rush commentary by some of the guest hosts and the like. So here's the inside kind of baseball on that. What most folks don't realize is that Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity were and are the only two national radio hosts of talk shows that actually charged a fee per month to run their shows. Now I'm talking talk radio here. Typically the way that it's done, it's called barter. And the agreement that you sign for these nationally syndicated hosts like Lars or Dana Lash or, Michael Savage when he was still on the air or any of the others was you just agreed to play their national commercials during when their show aired because they have network commercials they play. They cut away, we play our local commercials during the course of the show. So it's bartered. We didn't pay anything for it. They get their national spots played. That's how they make their revenue. We play our local spots during the show. We get our revenue. Everybody's fine and happy. Kumbaya, hugs and kisses. Well, Rush and Hannity, on the other hand, charge a monthly fee along with the spots that run inside their show and extra commercials running outside of the show. And it's based on market size. And I can tell you our monthly fee to run Rush Limbaugh in market, whatever we are, I think 214 was actually approximately $4,500 a month.
Wow.
And you take now a larger market, like say Portland, they're paying upwards of 20 to 25 grand a month.
Wow.
To run Rush. The reason that they're continuing to run Rush is because you have contracts with Premier Network, and those contracts, the only way you could get it is you had to be willing to sign a 3-year contract. Well, a lot of stations are still contracted with Premier, and as long as they're running Rush, they're on the hook to pay. And iHeartMedia, which used to be known as Clear Channel, they don't want to lose that revenue stream. And our contract came up for renewal in December, not all that long before Rush died. And one of the stipulations was that if Rush is not physically capable of doing the show, in other words, as long as if he's not alive, we're not running the show, or we're not going to be paying for the show. We're not paying for guest hosts, and we're not paying for best ofs. So we're not paying for it. And I was hoping that Premier was going to come forward with a host, but for them to do that, it would break the Rush contract, and they wouldn't be getting that revenue stream. So about, I guess it was 3 weeks ago, Premier Networks came out and said, we're going to continue running Rush essentially forever, which I read to mean, okay, so what you're doing is until every last station's contract is up, which could be 3 years from now, you're going to continue to run this show because you don't want to lose the revenue stream. And that's why you're hearing Rush in repeats every day. once I found that out, it's like, okay, because I was going to give them the benefit of the doubt because I've been with them so long. I was going to give them the benefit of the doubt, see who they were going to use as a replacement for Rush. And when they did that, it's like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to my backup plan that I put together a long time ago. And I've already given notice to Premier that, you know, we're done as of, you know, mid-April. So that's the story on Rush. So I hope that answers your question, Bill. And like I said, that's all inside baseball, but that's why you're still hear Rush right now.
Right.
Great,
So-
thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments they'd like to make to Bill?
Yeah, this Darlene.
Hi, Darlene.
Hi. Say, you know, I gave up my Eugene Register Guards subscription a few months ago. Was very disappointed with just all of the national stuff and not so much any local news anymore. And I want to thank you because you're one of the sources that I have for any local information of things that are going on. You have a lot of people, you know, on for fundraisers and different things that are coming on that I really miss that I don't see like in a newspaper. And I like that you can take an issue and expand it, where on the evening news, all we are getting are sound bites. You know, they don't give you much information. So I really do rely on you guys in the morning for a lot of what's going on around town.
Oh, well, first off, thank you. So I'm kind of old school. And, you know, my first radio gig, I was working with a guy named T.L. Fuller, who had been in radio news for years. And the guy was an utter tyrant, but he was. Hey, I see Steve over there laughing. The guy was an utter tyrant, but he was a true professional. And I learned a lot from him. And his, I guess you would say his mission statement was that you lead with local. And we're a local radio station. And so we do local news. And I mean, he ingrained that was the thing that people listened to the radio for in their local markets, is because they wanted to hear local information. And as I mentioned, you know, with the change in ownership rules with consolidation, a lot of that was lost. And I had one operations manager when I was working for stations that were owned by Clear Channel, which I consider to be one of the great satans of radio for a number of reasons, but said, oh, people don't care about local news. And if you're doing a local news story and that story is any more than 15 seconds long, you know, people don't listen to the radio for local news. And he said, and we have data to prove it. I said, well, what's the data? He says, well, people don't listen to radio stations for the local news. And he says, because, you know, our data shows that essentially because not enough detail is given in those stories. And I looked at him and I go, okay, you just told me that you want local news stories to be 15 seconds, but yet you're telling me that people aren't listening to us because we're not doing detailed enough local news. Like, what the hell? So I go old school on it, that, you know, you do local stuff and you try to expand on it. And that's where, you know, one of the nice things about the show is that we can have local guests come in, and rather than doing a 2-minute to a 3-minute short, you know, soundbite chat with them, we can go for 15, 20 minutes or a half hour or the like. As Sid down here at the bottom of my screen can attest, after being in the studio a number of times, you know, we're willing to go for, you know, a while on it and have people back to continue following up on it. So, and that's one of the things when you talked about the fires, I noted right off, it's like, okay, this is the biggest story really for media here locally in, I don't know how long, since maybe Mount St. Helens. And why are they still running soaps in the afternoon on the TV station? And honestly, I was angry during Snowmageddon a few years ago because we had a technical issue that took us off the air for a few days. And I looked at those kind of events as sort of being my Super Bowl. That's when, as a local station, you're supposed to step up and, where you stay at the station and you go the extra mile and you break programming as necessary to get information out. And so when the fires hit after the issues with Snowmageddon, I just sort of made up my mind, well, come hell or high water, whether I get any help or not, I'm going to cover this like a huge fanged dog on a piece of raw meat. And that's the way it's going to, and I did. I slept here for about a week and on the air from, sometimes 5 o'clock in the morning until almost midnight, but it needed to happen and people were relying on it because they didn't have really a source of any other information. I mean, one of the biggest compliments I got a phone call from a gal living in Newport that was thanking me because none of their local media in Newport had told them that Lincoln City was being evacuated because of the fire that they had burning near there, and that we were the only source of information for the evacuation that was going on in Lincoln City, and was ebullient that she was able to pick us up in Newport to be able to get the information because they didn't have any. So I kind of looked at it, it's like, well, we got it. We do have a big footprint. So, okay, well, you're welcome. And I'm glad that I helped you in Newport. It was kind of a nice little validation from one person off in the hinterlands, really, that it was helpful to them.
Well, I can add to that because my clock radio comes on to your station in the morning. And my sister and her husband were camping up around Sweet Home. And I heard about the fire and it said everything around, I guess, past Walterville Elementary School was being evacuated. Well, my sister lives just east of the Walterville Elementary School. So I immediately called on my cell phone to reach her where she was camping. So that's, well, here she was out of the area. She didn't know her home was possibly going to burn to the ground. But because of your newscast, I was able to call her and they were able to come home because they had their motorhome. So both of their vehicles were at their house and all of their insurance papers and everything. And so they were just lucky to get home and get up there and move their vehicles. And they waited it out at my house for a day and then over to some friends that had a place to park their camper, their motorhome.
Hey, Bill,
Yeah.
this is Sid, and I got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
I like I really appreciate the local news piece during the fires in particular. I appreciate that very much. And for me personally, I still have access to a lot of different folks. So I was able to get direct access, of course, from Jay. And then also from the ODF. I had some folks in the ODF who sent me information. I was able to send to my clients, but I think for most people, they had no idea where to source that access. So I think the fact that you were really focused in on that was great. And for folks who are listening to your station, that I just want to say thank you on that.
You're welcome.
My question to you, though, is my millennial sons do not listen to radio. They do not watch news. They do not read a newspaper, but they do download podcasts. Boy, do they ever. And So from your perspective or where you sit, how does, say, podcasts and the talk radio, how does that, where's that going in the future? Because, I can share a couple, like for instance, my youngest loves Ben Shapiro. He's all into
Sure.
Ben Shapiro. My oldest likes both Joe Rogan, and he actually listens to Alex Jones too. He's so funny because he used to be kind of my liberal son, but now he's gone. And they're the ones in let's see, next week after that, I'm going to help moving them to the 9th largest economy in the world called Texas. And so they're leaving the state because honestly, they feel there's zero future for them here in the state of Oregon. So, and there's a big future for them outside. And that's the reason why they're leaving. They're 28 years old, he and his wife. And so they're leaving. So my question though, really is about podcasts and talk radio and how you see that going in the future, because podcasts I was listening to podcasts a little bit, downloading things, here and there. But it seems like maybe in the last couple of years, it has exploded. And I'm not on the news side. I do download sports podcasts, no doubt about it. I love that. I'll take that over, FS1 or ESPN talking heads any day. So that's my question to you as far as how you see that the future and where talk radio will be going. And because podcasts, obviously, very, very cheap to run, very cheap, a microphone.
Yeah.
So
essentially, yeah.
anyway.
Okay. So that is a question that comes up in radio, and I'll tell you why that podcasts are as popular as they are, is because they are doing now what radio used to do. They are producing actual original content. And I've said this since the beginning. It's like, if radio got back to doing what it used to do, you wouldn't see the need for podcasts. This is classic capitalism right here. There is a need for content. People want original content. They want original, compelling content. And if you give it to them, even if they have to go dig for it on the interwebs, or now you just get it on an app on your smartphone, they're going to search it out. Radio stopped doing that. And I don't know if radio will ever start doing it again. I can tell you that, again, the great Satan, iHeart, formerly known as Clear Channel, they gave themselves the name iHeart because they thought it sounded friendlier. Oh, it's iHeart. We're so friendly. We're the wonderful radio group. They're Satan. But iHeart looks at it as a way to simply get rid of, to essentially take all of their programming and put it on the web to stream. They're looking at it as a cost-saving measure, because that means they can get rid of all of these expensive transmitters they have to maintain and have to license. Just replacing a transmitter is going to take a big bite out of $500,000. So, and then maintaining it, the electricity bill. I know my electricity bill is $12,000 a month on our station. So where do I think it's going? Well, I know that the big radio groups are really pushing the online content and are pushing for their hosts to create podcasts. What you're going to find, though, is what you're getting now for free is that likely it will in the future, and some podcasters are doing this right now, you're going to have to pay for the content. So I think what you're going to see is probably even more podcasts. I think it's going to put pressure on radio. And I think the radio stations that you're going to see survive that in the next 20 to 25 years are going to be, they're going to have to localize real heavy. And I think you'll see a lot of AM stations that will do what, for instance, KXL in Portland did, which is essentially dump their AM signal and go to an FM signal. You're going to, I mean, to compete, you're going to have to provide content. And for local radio stations, the only way that you're going to do it is to super serve your local community. And they're going to have to promote themselves, the fact that they're doing that. As far as the younger generation, I think, and honestly, Sid, that a big chunk of them, we've kind of lost. And it's through really the industry's own avarice and not thinking ahead. They're thinking ahead, you know, quarter to quarter, as opposed to planning ahead 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. Where are we going to grow our market? And how are we going to grow the market share? They're not. They're just looking for the quarterly earnings, and that's how far ahead they're looking. Kind of like politicians right now look at the 2-year election cycle, and that's all they're looking at.
Well, and Bill, I think you said it perfectly. You have, I think, permanently lost which is going to end up being a generation. And I look at my sons who are 28 and 26. They're permanently lost. They don't watch network TV. Everything is streaming. Everything is about getting it now. And they're all into podcasts. My son was telling me, like, for instance, Joe Rogan's getting approximately 200 million downloads a month on his podcast. 200 million. Think about that for a moment. And he's not even the largest. So that's just an example. And because I think Ben Shapiro actually dwarfs him. And where I was told Ben Shapiro's getting like 350 million downloads a month. And it's mind blowing. And that's where I think there's going to be a revenue stream really moving in that direction as well. But overall, the revenue stream will be fairly cheap compared to the production that would take to run an entire station. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I think on your perspective, though, on the niche and the local is going to be really critical going forward, because for the record, I did drop my subscription to the Register Guard 11 years ago. So
you're ahead of the curve, Sid.
I've not missed it at all. And I mean zero. And you know, whether they are in business today or not, it doesn't affect me whatsoever. And but I wish you the best going forward. And I think you're one of the last of the, I like when you said old school. I used to call Rick Little that when he was in the business. He was kind of old school, and you just don't have him anymore. Tom Adams, when he was on the radio, was old school. You're kind of the last. And when those of us like myself that were in elected office, we could have that professional courtesy, and that just doesn't exist anymore. And so which is unfortunate. But hey, thanks for being accessible today. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah. You know, one thing that so I'm not the only person at a news talk station that's a one-man band. KEX up in Portland, which I listened to that radio station when I was a kid, when it's what they called a full-service radio station. Lots of news, music, you know, live air personalities, 24 hours a day. Love that station. I know the PD, the program director up at KEX, and he's essentially where I am. It's him, and he has a gal that comes in for 30 hours a week that, you know, or 5 hours a day, or 6 hours a day, to do some news stories for him. And that's it. And that's Portland. That's Portland. And one of the things that, another inside baseball thing that Brad and I, Brad Ford is who I'm talking about. Brad and I had been talking about this for a while, and we finally put it together. We actually have a co-op that we put together with other news talk radio stations in the same boat as we are, where we share stories with each other. Down along the coast, over in Bend, Portland, Eugene, to where we're sharing stories with each other. And it's actually kind of helped. We send audio to each other, audio cuts and the like, that they can use as actualities during their newscasts and the like. And I'm kind of thinking, now that we've started that, I'm kind of thinking that actually might be a model going forward for other news talk stations to be able to kind of provide a wider scope of information. I mean, I get from the gal over in Bend. She's really good about covering certain things, stories in the legislature that, I mean, I can't follow everything that the legislature is doing, and God knows they got a lot of stuff that they're pushing. And so it's great because she has the kind of the same sensibility I do. She's been able to forward me a lot of stories that I haven't seen, and I forward them to her, which has been very helpful. I think that might be kind of a model going forward. We've only been doing it for about, I think, 6 or 7 months, and it'll remains to be seen how that's going to work out. I'm hoping that we can kind of turn it into a network, but to be part of it, if you want to play, you got to pay, and the currency right now is information that we're sharing with each other. So just one different way to skin the cat and try to make use of the resources that are out there. And since we're in different markets, we're not competing with each other, so why not?
We've overused our time, unfortunately. We've got time for like one more question. Does anybody have a final question?
Well, I'd just like to say thank you. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that when you interview the authors on these books, do you really read all those books?
Yes. Yeah.
They're very good interviews, and it sounds like you really know the material when you're asking the questions. So I just wondered if you really were reading all of those books. Do they send them to you or what?
Yeah, I work with, I haven't really counted. There's probably about a dozen different publishers that over the years I've kind of created relationships with. And yeah, they, they'll send me an advance copy of a book. And, usually they send me an email saying, hey, I got this author. This is what the, topic is. You interested? I'll reply, yeah. And we schedule an interview. They send me a copy of the book or a digital copy of it. And then I read the thing and talk to the authors. We get a lot of, I get a lot of solicitations for books, but then again, I've created a relationship with a number of these publishers for just that purpose. And so it's a good resource to have. They're getting their book promoted. Their goal is, of course, to sell books. So you want to sell books, right. Get them on a station where they're book friendly, and we really are book friendly. Particularly, mostly it's nonfiction. We've had a couple of authors that were fiction, but they're like mega million selling authors, like Jeff Lindsay of the Dexter series, which they made the TV series about. I mean, he comes to mind right off the bat. But yeah, I read them. Rob and I kind of divide them up, and that way, we both have a life outside of the radio station where we're not constantly reading somebody's books. So a lot of times, if you hear Rob with an author where he takes most of the interview, he read the book. Sometimes I'll chime in with a question. But yeah, we kind of divvy up the duties on that. But yeah, a couple of them that I called back after reading it went, you know what, I'm really not interested in talking to these people.